This is the Lakin Chronicles Road to Recovery podcast with addiction recovery specialist Dr. Greg Lakin. Real people, real stories, real addiction, and real recovery journeys. The road to recovery starts now.
Thank you, Phil. We have another episode of the Lakin Chronicles where we just talk to people that have been down the path of addiction and succeeded in overcoming it. So I think it's great to have people tell their story, especially a story of success. And it wasn't all easy, I know, but David, just start from the beginning and tell people how was it that you got addicted to pain pills and just how easily it happens and progresses.
Basically, I started around 17 or 18. Of course, I was drinking, and I'm also bipolar, and I didn't figure that out until I was 30. So early on, I had mental health issues, especially depression with it. But around 17 or 18, when I was in high school, a friend of mine, his granddad owned a pharmacy. Mm-hmm. So we started going in there at night, taking pills, mostly opiates. And I'll tell you what, the very first time I took it was basically a handful of Demerol, Percocets, went home, and I was hooked. Mm-hmm. I mean, from then on, I was like, in fact, that first night, that high, I was like, I'm in trouble.
Because you like the feeling so much.
The sensation, it knocked out the depression, and ever since then, it's just been, a roller coaster. But I knew the first time I tried it that I was going to have issues. Yep. And
then you build up a tolerance, and so it just progressed.
You do. When I was about 20, Heather and I, who's my wife now, we moved to Cheney, Kansas, and lived there for about 7 years. But I actually made it through school when I was around 25, 26. But around 24, 25, I started using opium. Mm-hmm. And that was my primary addiction for the next almost 20 years. Wasn't using really street narcotics. Just opium, and
when you say opium, you're talking about oxycodone.
I'm talking opium.
Straight opium.
I was
okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to tell you how I was getting it, because it's harder to get now, but you used to be able to purchase dried poppy pods on the internet, and they were opium poppy pods, so you make tea. I also grew it in my backyard. So, but basically I would whip up some tea, and the thing with opium is it's so long acting. I'd be high, do one dose, be high for over 24 hours. So It was long acting, and I was using that to treat the depression, because when I would use it, it would usually just knock out a cycle, and it just became more and more until I hit about 30. And I woke up one day, and it just, the floor fell out. Just mentally, everything. And then I went to the cycle from about 30 to 32 of just in and out of the psych ward in Wichita. A total of close to 50 times in a 2-year period. And
for uncontrolled bipolar.
Uncontrolled bipolar and addiction both. Yeah. And it wasn't until about the end of that 2 years that they actually diagnosed me with the bipolar. And I spent the next, probably from 32 to 40, just trying to get the meds regulated just for the bipolar. And it wasn't until I was about 40 years old that I found a combination that worked. And the main issue I was having was I was either just dealing with the bipolar and not the addiction, or the addiction and not the bipolar. Mm-hmm. So I would be doing fine in one area and not really taking care of the other areas. So it took several years to finally learn how to balance that out. And it was probably till I was 40, 41 till I finally started to get some kind of footing and on both issues. So it wasn't until here recently, I was on Depakote and Seroquel. Those are my two main medications for the bipolar, and I stayed on that combination for 10 years. It wasn't just until a few months ago they took me off the Depakote and put me on a new medication, because I was struggling in the last 2 years because the Depakote just wasn't working. Sure. So anyway, that's kind of everything kind of in a nutshell.
Right. Well, there's so many lessons to be learned here. First of all, you didn't know that you had a mood disorder.
Oh, I had
and
no
yet,
idea.
Subconsciously or consciously, you were trying to treat your own.
I was self-medicating, yeah, and I knew I had something going on, but I didn't know what it was. I just knew that when I feel a cycle coming on, if I hit it really hard with the opiates several times, I'd just be able to bypass it.
So you could bypass the manic episodes.
And the dip, the low, both, with just blowing it out with opiates. And it worked for several years, I mean, to an extent, but I was also functional. I could function on the opiates. I mean, it brought me up to a level that I was just functional. And that's kind of where the Suboxone comes in. It brings me to a level where I'm just functional and I don't obsess over opiates. You know, it kind of breaks that cycle a little bit. I mean, it's just one part. There's still other things you have to do. I just can't rely on the medication. You know, I still go to counseling. I go to groups. You know, it's one part of the recipe for success, I guess.
Well, and you're so intelligent. So you were able to get away with kind of self-treating your own uncontrolled bipolar, both the dips and the manic,
right,
with whatever drugs you had in hand. I mean, it was
exactly
to you, it was better than uncontrolled.
Yeah. Yeah.
But by the same token, it was really hard to diagnose your mood disorder because people probably assumed that it was brought on by drugs or brought on by, you know.
And that's the biggest part when I was just going in and out of the psych ward was, does he really have a mood disorder or is it addiction? You know, what are we dealing with?
His urines are coming back positive for this or positive for that. And so
right.
It's easier to just categorize, hey, he's just a drug addict.
Yeah.
He's just taking these drugs. He's just, you know.
Exactly.
So you never really got probably definitive help or a good diagnosis until, like you said, later on in life.
Yeah. It wasn't until I actually got away from St. Joe and the psychiatrist I was seeing then that I actually ended up going to Halstead when they were still open, Dr. Hahn.
I remember him.
And he's the one that he took me off everything and he started me from scratch, and in 3 or 4 weeks he's like, I promise you, if you stay on this, he's like, you're going to feel better. Sure enough, I did. It started, you know, I could finally at least see some hope.
Yeah, he was an amazing doctor, recently retired. But
yes, he was.
Yeah.
He was a lifesaver for me. So.
Good. No, so finally you start to realize, hey, this is really a mood disorder that I've got to get control of or I'll never get my life back.
Yes.
And so you, to your credit, you did that, and now you're on new meds. There's always new meds out there and new treatment regimes for bipolar or any other associated mood disorder.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, to your credit, I mean, you've been doing well. Tell people what you're doing now.
Well, back when I was 30 and living in Cheney, I actually was working in the IT field for 2 or 3 years. And when we moved back to Pratt, my wife got a really good job in Pratt. That's why we moved back to Pratt, where we were originally from. Now I'm a CNA at the hospital. I also do maintenance. And I'm going back to school right now to get my physical therapy assistant license. So.
Perfect. No, thank you for your service. I mean, you're there frontline in the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
And
thank you.
Contributing, absolutely. So what do you think your secrets are to well, we use Suboxone as a tool as well.
Right.
And so tell people how that worked for you.
Incredibly well. Where I was first introduced to Suboxone, I actually went to Hazleton in Minnesota back, I'm trying to think. It was probably about 14 years ago. And they treated me with Suboxone when I was coming off the opiates. And the psychiatrist who treated me there said, hey, they're also doing research on using this as long-term. So when you get out, you might try to pursue that. He said the problem is you're going to probably have a hard time finding somebody to prescribe it. And but I was really impressed with it just because it took away the cravings. You're functional, you don't get a high from it, and it just blew me away how much it helped with my addiction side, and that that obsessive thinking. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but that's kind of where I got introduced to it. And I did find somebody um, when I got back to Pratt. I actually had to go to Kansas City. I found a doctor there that I went to for 5 or 6 years. And so I've actually been on Suboxone now probably 12 years. Now I have had some relapses in between, and that's more or less because I've had slips in the with the bipolar.
Right.
Because whenever I had like a major, even with medication, you're still going to have
Ups and downs,
symptoms, and it's just it was so hard to break that instinct to just fire it out, by just going all out. So, but the last few years have been probably the best years of my life, just because I've gotten everything manageable, and the bipolar seems to be a lot more manageable. I don't have the extreme ups or downs, and a lot of that's because I don't use like I used to either.
Mm-hmm.
I take my medication every day, just doing meetings, still doing counseling, doing those small things, eating right, sleeping. There's the small things you have to do every day to stay on top of it, besides just the addiction part. So.
No, it's a lot of work to keep your mood stable.
It is.
And certainly buprenorphine products like Suboxone, I mean, they've got that long half-life too.
Exactly.
So they help add to the stability. And then, of course, your controller meds for your bipolar.
Yes.
I mean, any quick fix is going to wear off quickly, and it's going to be counterproductive. So it takes people a long time to realize. Like, if there's a quick fix, like a Xanax or a hydrocodone or whatever it is, every quick fix is going to be counterproductive in the long run, and you just start that cycle again.
It is. And it took me a long time to really realize that it's just not worth doing. Right. And I think the other hard part with the bipolar is it takes a long time to get adjusted to those medications. So it's such a long process, and sometimes the medication doesn't work, so we have to try something else. So it's another month, 2 month wait till you really get the benefits of it. So
kind of hard to be patient when you're manic.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And the other thing that's helped me tremendously is just having external support. Luckily, I have a wife that's very supportive. I got family, I have friends, even at work that I've worked with for 10, 12 years that say, will tell me if I'm not acting right. So that it helps to have that external feedback. Right. So I can kind of, because a lot of times I don't see it myself.
No, you need to have support there that's every bit as intelligent as you are and will call you on your BS, right?
And you have to listen to it.
Yeah, right. Yes,
yes. That's the hard part.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
So.
There's a lot of good lessons to be learned, and it's, for you, I know it's been a longer battle because of a mood disorder in the mix, and yet we have so many people out there that have mood disorders that keep them addicted, or at least maybe the mood disorder was actually part of the cause for their addiction.
Exactly.
And so you did well to treat both at the same time. And,
yes.
And it took a while, but you did it. And so what is life like on the other side?
It's wonderful because when I was using, I mean, every day it was just like keeping your head above water. You would just barely be able to get through the day. It's like, where am I going to get my next fix? Where am I going to get the money to get my supply of my drugs? And it's just, you're just subsisting, you're just surviving. And now I'm not just a survivor, I'm like thriving. So I'm on the other side where you get to a point where you can start enjoying life again. Like I said, the last few years have been really the best years of my life because I'm able to enjoy things now. I mean, I can't tell you how good life is.
Yep.
Today compared to really the last 40 years of my life, 30 years of my life,
Yeah. I like your message that you're constantly vigilant. You literally set yourself up for success by having those around you that will watch you, as well as doing the work with regard to groups and just being because I have some really good friends. Mm-hmm. One is a physician that helped train me, but he loved the manic, and he would literally let he'd go off his meds so he could go manic, and he thought he was doing the work of 2-3 people at a time, and yet it always ended.
It always ends bad.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Yeah.
So it is hard to, as a person with bipolar, especially when you like the manic, to stay on your meds. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it is, because several times I went off the meds and I would I'd just be feeling good and think, well, maybe I didn't really have bipolar.
Right.
You know, and that happened, numerous times. And, every time it was just crash and burn.
Yeah.
It took a long time to realize I am bipolar. I had a hard time accepting mental health. I always knew I had an addiction, that it was harder to accept the mental health issue than it was the addiction. Because nobody wants to say they have something wrong mentally with them. There's such a stigma with it. So, but,
and they say that a lot. I mean, there's so much addiction in the various world of mood disorders. And although, the addiction is the headline, the real story is, hey, we've got an underlying mood disorder that's never been treated correctly. And the person's maybe self-treating with whatever they have. Like, I'll talk to people, and I don't know that you inherit the tendency to be addicted, but I do know you inherit the tendency for certain mood disorders, perhaps, or the ability to go into fight or flight quickly. And so, I often hear from some of my patients that, well, my grandpa, he was an alcoholic, and my dad smoked marijuana, and my mom liked her mommy's little helper, her Valium or whatever, and I just smoke pot and take pain pills. And it's like they're treating the same disorder on anxiety or bipolar or whatever it was. They're treating the same disorder, but just with whatever the soup du jour is of that generation.
Exactly. But I mean, today it's good. Not every day is great. I still have cycles with the bipolar, but they are just not as near severe. I mean, it's pretty level, and I'm just more lucid in general. I can actually plan to do things like long term, which I never had that ability before. You just can't do that when you're addicted. It's always short term of everything. It's
that reactive fight or flight part of your brain. It can care less about tomorrow when it's running the show. It's just worried about the next 10 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful, David. I appreciate you coming out and telling your story. I mean, it takes a lot of courage to tell your story, and the sole purpose of you doing this is to help others.
Yes.
And to let them know that it can be done.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It definitely can. Yeah. You've got to be persistent. You have to really want it, but it's never going to be perfect. You're always going to have struggles. It's just how you deal with those struggles and how you deal with them, and you just do the next right thing. It's hard to do sometimes, but you can do it.
Yeah, your testimony that it's worth it.
It's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth it. Just whatever you put into it, I get 10 times back. It doesn't take a whole lot to get some success. Just if you just apply yourself a little bit, you'll get it back tenfold. So.
Well, thank you again for telling your story and
thank you.
And inspiring others that they can pull this off. They say 80% of the people that need help out there are not getting it, and a lot of them don't feel like they can do it. And so great. Well, thank you again.
All right, thank you. Okay.
We'll do a little fist bump. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
you, Dr. Lakin.
You bet.
Dr. Lakin is a board-certified family medicine doctor with an emphasis in addiction medicine and over 25 years of experience. For addiction recovery services in the Wichita area, please visit www.centerforchangeks.com or visit samhsa.gov for a national directory of resources and recovery centers in your area. You can also find these links in the podcast description. Thank you for listening to the Lakin Chronicles Road to Recovery podcast. And remember, you've got this.